Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is me, Robert Phoenix. I am back for another edition of the Friday FARcast, and I'm going to be joined here today with by Russ Winter, coming in all the way from the Czech Republic, and hopefully is he in here?
Is it here?
There you are, Russ. How's it going?
Living the dream, as Giuseppe always says.
Living the dream. So, real quick, we're gonna dive into this Texas thing. But before we do, let me just give people some background on you and your website. If you're new to the show, Russ Winter is an American expat. He lives in Prague, of the Czech Republic, formerly Czechoslovakia. And he has a website called winterwatch.net, which is one of the cutting edge websites in terms of kind of breaking down events and really kind of going into the deep, dark crevasses and corners of some of these events that seem to be a constant script, if it were, in our lives on a frequent basis, and just does absolute yeoman's work. It's a great looking site. We're going to be going there today to look at an article he wrote about a shooting in 2020, going back to 2016. So we're going to be diving into that, as well as some of the other anomalies. There's always anomalies with these events, and the more that we spend time with them, the more that they begin to emerge, and the official narrative doesn't hold up very well. So
yeah, this one in Texas is weird. First, it kind of started off with nothing,
right,
and then they kept changing the stories and putting new elements in the stories, and then changing that again, and then finally the official story, I guess it's official story, is just what a mishmash, what a shitstorm they finally came up with. Just, at first I really didn't want to look at this one because I thought that Buffalo was so shoddy that I didn't want to draw attention away from that one.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're forced to look at this Texas one too.
Just to echo your sentiment, I'm really not that interested in these events anymore. I mean, honestly, so let me just clarify that. I think it's important to talk about them because we have to dispel them. This is about the only thing we can do with them at this point. But they've just been strung out now for quite a while. And each time this thing comes up, I'm like, here we go again. We're going to have to hear the anti-gun rhetoric. We're going to have to hear all these crazies and loonies come out and start shaking their fists and, banging on their pulpits. Somebody who you are probably familiar with, Steve Kerr, lost his cookies last week, and it was the same day that the Golden State Warriors were playing the Dallas Mavericks in Texas, by the way, on the day of the shooting. So if it was that big of a deal, why not just stop the game? Right? Just stop the game and make it unplayable at that point. But of course, Steve Kerr has to come out and get worked up about it and then storm off the interview process. And what was really interesting, Russ, and
I missed that, but Steve Kerr is a really great individual. He's really one of my dad's favorite players.
I know. Steve, there's a lot to like about Steve Kerr. Yeah, but when he gets into this area, he becomes imminently unlikable. It's like right. he cannot parse out, for instance, a weekend in Chicago. He'll never talk about that. He can't talk about the Uyghurs in China. He'll never talk about that. But whenever the gun issue comes up, he's frothing at the mouth.
For some strange reason, right?
Well, his father, Malcolm, was a teacher at American University in Beirut. And I'm pretty convinced that was a hit. That wasn't random. Well, that wasn't just some wacky terrorist who went in. Kay Griggs talks about Malcolm Kerr, Steve Kerr's dad. And I'm not convinced that it was. And even if it was, you would think that Steve Kerr would be against terrorism, right? I mean, if that's true, but that's not what's happening here. So what's interesting, Russ, we'll get into your thoughts, your takes, and some of the things that you've been uncovering, is that yesterday I played a clip from the father, kind of always Martinez. He's the father of the kid who supposedly, I'm going to use the word supposedly, got shot in Santa Barbara, in Isla Vista, with the incel killings of one Elliot Rodger, which I don't believe happened.
Neither do I.
And if you look at Martinez, talk about his son and talk about guns, he's almost at that same pitch and at that same level as Steve Kerr. And they both do kind of the same thing. Steve Kerr walks off the set, but Martinez doesn't, but it's very close. And while Steve Kerr isn't crying or faking crying, which I'll at least give him credit for, Martinez gets to this fever pitch and he gets angry and he's crying, but there's no tears on his face. And then this guy comes out and says, I'm going to dedicate my life to gun control for the rest of my days. And after about a month, you don't hear from him again. Right. So he's there to play a role. He's there to catalyze the event. And now every time one of these events comes up, as long as Steve Kerr has the ability to have a microphone, he will be given that microphone in order to press his agenda. In every other area, I think Steve Kerr is probably, pretty good guy. I mean, he's a great coach. Seems like he has great rapport with his players, but this is his, pardon my term, soft white underbelly. And it's not.
He's been maybe brainwashed on it. I'm not quite sure what these guys are proposing that you do with guns. Do they have a definitive proposals? I mean, this just seems like this general.
Well, apparently there's this bill that's been floating around for a while. I think it's the Barbara Lee bill, which never ever gets voted on or passed because it's just so. It basically ends the Second Amendment, and that's what he's promoting. He's promoting the passage of this bill, and that there are 50 senators who are negligent, and that he hopes that they get off on the power and the money as it relates to the slaughter of the innocents, which always comes up.
I think that guns get the attention, but I think there's some really other big issues behind these things. One which I kind of hinted at before we came on the show, the article I sent you about the Dallas and what happened on this particular one, and also in lesser extent in Buffalo, but here you have this police just making jackasses out of themselves, inept, not responding. I think that's by design.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened in the Dallas police shooting in 2016 with a guy named Mecca Johnson. Mm-hmm. And he was like a carpenter out of the Army, not a trained marksman, not a weapons expert, just a carpenter. I call him Super Carpenter. And he just ran rings around the Dallas police. Come on. This guy's running around outdoors for 12 minutes, wrecks his car or runs the car off the road, jumps out of the car, out in the open, running around shooting randomly, somehow gets into the school. School's supposed to be locked up and secured. So how did that happen? Engages some police officers in the school and wounds them. How come these 18-year-old kids without any military and police training are able to just dominate the police? How's that work?
Well, that's something I brought up with this event in Uvalde. When you really break it down, and I'll do it here for a second, is that you have supposedly this kid, Ramos, who doesn't have any real presence at a firing range at all. Okay. And I live in Texas, and yeah, you can fire some guns every now and then, but if you're consistent with firing guns, it'll get somebody's attention and they'll call the cops, even though it's Texas.
It's expensive to get training. And the guy in Buffalo, same thing, 18-year-old kid, didn't have a job, managed to secure that weapon, that Bushmaster, and really knew how to use it. I mean, that guy was just very proficient with that gun. How'd that happen? How's that even possible?
Right. And in the case,
firing range, you'd have to have somebody probably work with you and train you.
So
you have to have some military background or some kind of a background that neither of these kids have. So that's a real kind of a ridiculous premise of this whole thing, that they're that good with these guns.
Right. And again, I pointed this out yesterday, that when you're in a situation like that, and I've been to a firing range, and even under very controlled circumstances, your adrenaline is high, right? Because you know the gun is going to be loud and it's going to have a kick. Even something like an AR-15, which is minimal, you're still going to experience that. So your adrenaline, from the moment you get within, like, 6 feet within a gun, your adrenaline goes up because of what it can do. It is not something that is an ordinary device. Not many people use on a daily basis. That's number one. You get into a situation where your adrenaline is through the roof, because theoretically you're going to go into that school and you're going to start killing, right? And maybe if you believe the story that he shot his grandmother, his adrenaline is already through the roof. And when your adrenaline is really, really high, and you know this in sports, you can't always perform as well, right? You have to control your adrenaline so that you can be functional in that moment.
I mean, they have, in military, they have to get people to overcome that.
That's right.
Even trained soldiers have a hard time in combat and combat situations overcoming that. Some never do. Some are just worthless in combat situations. So the idea that he could go and kill all these people, combining the two, the Buffalo guy and this one, and how's it pronounced? Uvalde,
which is where Matthew McConaughey is from.
So Uvalde, they're just cold stone killers, really?
So on the flip side, you have 3 cops who do get the training, and they have to put range time in every month. That's part of their deal. They got to go there, they got to shoot, they got to fill out their little time card, and they have been in situations theoretically where their adrenaline has been challenged. Well, what happens? He takes out 3 of them.
Yeah, and he's running around outside for 12 minutes. Somehow manages to get into this. The whole intervention or the interdiction of this armed kid just seemed non-existent. Totally non-existent.
Right. He shows up, and he's kind of a Nicholas Cruz clone in some ways. And Nicholas Cruz being the supposed shooter in Parkland. And same profile. He's troubled. There's intervention with, the schools and, the CSP. So they have a profile on Nicholas Cruz, and then they have a profile on Salvador Ramos. So it's another Nicholas Cruz kind of cutout in a lot of ways. But getting back to those cops. Those cops are wearing some form of body armor. They always do. Cops have a vest, and in that vest they're usually, and this is something that we don't see, by the way, they usually have body cams. No body cams. There's no body cams. They have body cams. They have their comms. They have 2 pistols. They have one on their hip, and usually they'll have one in their pouch, in their gear. So there's that. They already have a form of body armor. Now, I don't know what they're wearing on their heads. Maybe they're wearing their baseball caps. Who knows? But for Salvador Ramos to down those police, he's got to hit a target area that does not include the body armor, that does not include the vests that they're wearing. So he's either got to get them below the waist, in the face, or he's got to get them with their arms, which in many cases are probably flailing at that point. So in order to get those 3 shots, right, he's got to be very, very specific and good. And this is a guy who supposedly played Fortnite. And Russ, what this reminds me of, and we're going to get into this piece here. I just wanted to set the stage for this. This reminds me of the hijackers of 9/11, who took 2 flying lessons and were supposedly able to fly those planes into the Twin Towers, right? So we're supposed to believe that Salvador Ramos, who has played Fortnite and Call of Duty, that's his training. Like, that's how he gets good at this. The whole thing's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's cartoon world. The same thing happened in Buffalo. He is just an expert shot, and that was strange because you got two ladies playing possum on the ground, and he just goes and shoots them. He shoots one in the head, and then actually there's a video that James Fetzner and Brian Davidson put out, an analysis of that whole shooting that people need to go see. It's really amazing. It'll bust this thing wide open if enough people see it. And in that video is actually a clip, I think, from one of the gun companies or something, showing the effect of that 223 bullet on a head. It just blows your skull apart. Well, nothing like that happened. Nothing like that happened when he did the coup de grace on the possum lady.
Possum lady. Yeah. Yeah. At that distance, are you kidding me? I mean, come on.
It'd be like a watermelon just splattered all over the place.
It'd be a David Cronenberg movie at that point.
Yeah. So that didn't happen. So then he goes and the so-called security guy just pops out of nowhere, almost like a CGI. And I showed it to several people, and that's what they thought it was. That's the position you're going to take. You're a former police officer, and you're just going to pin yourself to the wall behind a kind of like a cracker or chip stand.
So what's interesting, and I never thought about this until you just brought this up, is that we have a whole generation raised on video games. And not just
cartoon world, right?
Cartoon world. So when somebody pops up like that, it almost looks like CGI. To a generation that's played video games, that could be real.
Yep.
Because that's how they perceive a certain type of reality. So we're dealing with a whole generation of beings that have been modified, quite frankly, to believe that that thing is real. Just like previously, there was a whole generation of beings modified to believe that if it's on TV, it's real.
You got another generation that probably could see through it, but doesn't want to look at it, or refuses to even engage in it. That's the other thing going on.
Well, they're on the clock. They're like looking at their chips. They want to hold on to their chips, because if the shit hits the fan, they want to make sure that they still have all their chips in place, so that their whatever end game they have is going to be relatively comfortable and safe. So they don't.
But that security guy was not trained. He just shot him, and anybody worth their medal would have been in a shooter pose somewhere, presenting a low target, ambushed him, and like you said at the beginning, shooting him in the knee, shooting him in the ankle, shooting him in the butt, all kinds of targets. That body armor doesn't protect your whole body.
No, it doesn't protect your whole body. But in the case of somebody like Salvador Ramos, who is trying to take down 3 police officers, again, you just got to think about this. They've got the vests on. Their arms are moving targets. Maybe there's the potential of hitting them in the head. So really, what's available? It's the legs. And in order to take out all 3, right, you'd have to be really, really good and not take on any fire from the either. Like, so if you're hitting one and maybe you're trying to hit the other than the other, first of all, I guarantee you that those cops are trained to not be in a bunch. They are trained to be spread out, right? So it's not like bowling pins. Oh, let's just all gather together. Now, in a riot situation, they'll stay together. That's a whole different thing. When you're dealing with a crowd and a mob, you don't want to be spread out, because the mob will pick you off. But in a situation like this, where it's 3-on-1, here's your triangle offense right here. You want spacing, right? You want
ambush. You get 3 different points of ambush.
That's right.
Set up on somebody.
That's right. So
it's absurd that he would even try to engage these guys. It doesn't make any sense at all. It'd be over.
Right. And they had a drill on March 22nd at the same school. So you would think that they would have some kind of understanding about what to do. Hey, it was just a few months ago before you actually practice this thing. Oh yeah. Are you going to bunch up like that? No, you're going to spread out so that you could have a triangulation on the suspect. Doesn't happen. And not one of them manages to stop him. That is a huge, right from the jump. We got a mile wide hole in this thing. Let's talk about your article here a little bit more. I've got it up on the screen, as you can probably see.
Yeah, it's a different angle that I think we need to look at. Now, the Buffalo thing was a little different. I think that's just kind of an anti-white agenda. You know, whites are terrorists, extremists. That's the agenda there.
Right.
But the one in Texas is right out of the McCaw Johnson case. So what happened is that he just ran circles in a similar way to what we just described around these Dallas police. They couldn't touch him. And I think he ended up killing 5, wounding 11 or something like that. He just had a very high kill ratio to hit ratio. The end game is what I would call a quasi-federalization of local police. And they're going to use the Israeli security model. Now, recent leaks that came out by George Soros back around 2014, 2015 have revealed that he's pushing this whole agenda. So there's an article out called "Leaked Memo Reveals Soros Plan for Federally Controlled Police." And then Obama was on record for being for this as well. And then Donald Trump echoed it in a post-convention interview with the New York Times, says we're going to federalize every police department in this country. So, I mean, that's not something that can be done overnight because you have to overcome some local resistance to get there. And so it's just been kind of on the back burner, but there's been a number of these, what I would call staged deceptions where the key component is police yokelism, local yokels, untrained, unable to handle little kids with firearms, things like that. Mm-hmm. So Trump had an ominous call for quote unquote changing the playbook. And here's what he said on a Fox and Friends show when he was running for office. He said, "Our local police, they know who a lot of these people are. They're afraid to do anything about it because they don't want to be accused of profiling and they don't want to be accused of all sorts of things." He argued that the United States should follow Israel's policing protocols. So essentially what he's speaking to is pre-crime, profile for what, right? Sure, you got to be aware of the criminals in your community, but what does that mean? That means you just keep an eye on them for sure and have surveillance on them. He says, Israel has done an unbelievable job and they will profile. They'll profile. They see something that's suspicious, they will profile. They will take that person in. You see that?
Yep.
They take the person in and check them out. Do we have a choice? Look what's going on. Do we really have a choice? We're trying to be so politically correct in our country, and this is only going to get worse. So then in an August interview, Trump proposed the Mossad model for combating quote unquote terrorism. So all these guys are on board. Trump, certainly Biden. I think Biden is just going to follow up aggressively on what
Trump was for red flag laws. Like I think he thought those were a good idea because Ivanka and Jared said they were. So he was pro red flag law. He's backed Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, who is pro red flag. And for people that aren't aware of what red flag means, if you display any kind of suspicious behavior, you are red flagged, and therefore you cannot own a gun. It's like pre-crime. It's like mind crime. So if they believe that you're capable of doing something that's dangerous, then it will disqualify you from owning a firearm. So this is something that Trump has been behind and supported. What's interesting is that the no gun zone for schools, that was brought into being by Joe Biden. He introduced that when he was a senator. So think about that. This is all Joe Biden stuff. And when we have these shootings, theoretical shootings, where are they occurring? They're occurring in school zones where there's no guns.
Right.
Absolutely no guns. And I know not everybody can do this, but if you're not homeschooling your kid at this point, there are so many random variables you're leaving them up to. Even in some of the better schools, you're still dealing with random variables. So I think this is really a move about, securing your kids' safety and their intellectual capacity by taking possession of that. I'll talk a little bit more about this this character in Dallas here. I was looking at his photo. I mean, Russ, he looks so lifeless there with his dashiki. Of course, it's a purple dashiki, and we know that we're in the purple revolution. He just looks so lifeless, and almost even looks like it could be photoshopped.
Yeah, he just goes in front of a nail place on a strip mall, a beauty nail place, and to pose. Really?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's an old story that people probably don't remember, but he had a stereotypical terrorist Facebook page that looked like it was put up by the same Hegelian dialectic operative that did Dylan Roof, synthetic fraud. Instead of Roof's Rhodesian flag and KKK symbolism, Johnson portrayed a pan-African flag and a Black Power symbol. So that's the idea of, getting your extremist message across to the plebes out there. So he decided to go to a strip mall that looked like a green screen to me and pose in front of a local beauty shop in a regalia and make a Black Power fist. And that was posted on his Facebook page. And then there were a number of stories and unconfirmed rumors that Johnson was involved with radical Islam. Naturally, he's a big anti-Semite. They always get that angle in there as well, because that's your shadow language. That's your your neurolinguistic program that kind of triggers response in most people.
Yeah, that's true. It has that effect.
Just line it up, all these different boogeymen and positions that these people take. And the thing about the guy in Buffalo, I want to get this in because I don't want to digress too much, but the guy who said, go after high value targets, that was in the manifesto. Well, did he go after high value targets?
No.
He went after grandmothers, Black grandmothers. Great Replacement. Was that Great Replacement? I mean, those people that he allegedly killed were like probably 7th, 8th generation Americans. Been here for probably as long as any Americans. So that nothing made any sense. He loved that Anders Breivik, the Norwegian killer.
By the way, the Norwegian killer physically could not have done what he did over the period of time and kill that many people in 2 separate locations. Sorry, not happening.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, the whole idea that's his hero. Well, who did he kill? 72 Norwegian children.
White Norwegian children.
What's that have to do with the Great Replacement?
Right.
So exactly. The narrative or the rhetoric doesn't match the actions, and they don't on any of these guys. Now, I don't know, the one in Texas, I guess, is not political. It's probably this is more of a pre-crime mental health. Being able to grab people, get them off the street, before they act out. Some gun control, I'm sure. But also, I think the big part of that is also selling the idea of a different type of police force, people that can handle somebody like this.
The rage, right? 2020, summer 2020, defund the police, and
because they're racist and they're incompetent. That's the whole message.
Right, exactly. And so what happened is we saw a high degree of lawlessness. It was straight out of a Batman movie. And what's going to be the effect of that on people who live in those high crime and lawless areas like Minneapolis, St. Paul, New York City, Chicago? You're going to want more police because you're seeing the result of this really soft relation with crime. Well, we're not going to recognize it. If we don't recognize it, well, we don't have to report it. So the statistics are down. And then philosophically, it's not there. If you're not there to watch a tree fall in the forest, then how can there be crime? Right. So there's all these weird kind of justifications for that. But then what happens is that there's the reality, and people are getting their homes broken into regularly. They're being assaulted, beaten up, sexually violated, in some cases maimed and murdered. And now Biden just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago and said, well, we don't want to defund the police. We want to give the police more money. we want to give them more money. Well, why do they want to give them more money? So they can go out and buy more unused, like heavy duty assault equipment from DHS, because that's what they did when Obama was president. DHS was offloading all their assault equipment to local police departments. And then,
but I think the next logical extension of that is, sure, you militarize them.
right.
First you neuterize them,
Yep.
and make them kind of inept and weak.
Right.
And then you give them a bunch of arms, the DHS, but then there's going to be a control over that. That's how they get the national control. And they bring in a bunch of goons to run the show, a bunch of Stasi Cheka types.
Well, they sent, during the Obama administration, they set up a program where these sergeants and police chiefs, sheriffs would go to Israel, and they would train with the IDF. That's what was happening. They train with the IDF, and then they go back to the States, and every now and then their IDF trainers would come over. That's the other part of this. They'd come over. Ferguson is one of those places. So the police chief of Ferguson had been to Israel to train with the IDF. And then we have the whole thing with Michael Brown, whether they IDF that thing, that's to be debated. But we can see the kind of the right and the left hand of this thing. You're getting the militarized equipment from DHS, and then you're getting the training from the Israelis, who just see how they treat the Palestinians, and you'll understand how the Israelis deal with so-called criminals. And then the other part with the Israeli thing is that you've got this whole Unit 8200, which is run by Paul Singer, and they're all these kind like on the spectrum savants that are drafted out of the IDF, and they're like their super cyber group in Israel, and they are trained to get into surveillance, pre-crime, thought crime, all those things, and to ultimately integrate them into this global system where they know who you are, they know what you're capable of, they know what your predilections are, and they can basically assemble a psychographic profile on anybody at any given moment. And if there is the right permission, they can do exactly what they're trying to do here with somebody like Salvador Ramos, which is take them off the streets.
Yep, that's exactly it. And then there's also infiltration of the local police. That takes time, but you just one after another, you get these strange individuals, these fifth columnists that turn up, and we see it every day. Whether it's the transgender lady that's running the Secretary of Health, I mean, just all these bizarre people.
The Secretary, you almost didn't put the TH in there. It sounded like the Secretary of Hell, right?
Yeah. Secretary of Hell, right? or you get this lady that's handling just kind of the profile of these people. You get somebody like this lady that's handling the program for the
baby formula.
Baby formula. You see the picture of her?
Yeah, let's bring her up here.
You got it? You have it?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to find it. It'll take me.
She looks like she's got a gingerbread house out in the forest.
So I've seen her before. These are the
people that are going to run everything, including the nationalized police. Trust me.
Oh, she's like horrible looking. Absolutely. And I've seen her before. I think she's a senator, isn't she? Or is she a hold on, or maybe she might be a congressman.
Yeah, how does somebody like that even get elected?
Yeah, here we go.
Weeks.
Here we go.
You find it? Here. You find it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right.
I mean, we're kind of digressing, and I mean, but this is what I imagine happening. This is who I see running the national police. People like this, freaks. Yeah. You should get a picture of her in full body garb, see what she's wearing. Purple hair.
Right, of course, purple, the color of the day. Okay, so let's roll this back 40 years ago. Not that long ago. 40 years ago, where we were in the 80s, right? We're in the 80s 40 years ago. This person's mentally ill.
Right.
This person passes for being mentally ill.
Now she has great power.
She has been exalted in the insane asylum world that we live in. She's one of the people. It's like the inmates are running the prison. The inmates are running the asylum now. And that's exactly who she is.
And they just pop up. I mean, it's kind of like the Hungarian Soviet of 1919. That's kind of the historical analogy that I'm using, where a bunch of Cheka, they brought down the Hungarian Republic. It brought in the central government Cheka style control, and there was a huge war on local police under the guise of reform. And for instance, Al Sharpton, he's calling for federal control over local law enforcement, special prosecutors, which I call corrupt star chambers. And so you get to produce government similar to the Hungarian Soviet of 1990, who rule large parts of the United States during, I think, a civil war. They won't be able to do it everywhere, but they'll get rid of anybody that's a sane police officer. They won't last long.
Look at that.
Is that her?
Yeah. Her in question marks.
She looks like a transgender.
I put money on it. I put money on it. Even though there's a bit of a concave there with the Adam's apple, they have ways of dealing with that. Man, that is she's terrifying. She's absolutely terrifying. And of course you have the purple here. You got a little, I think that's Klimt, isn't it? On the Gustav Klimt on the wrist there. Yeah, Al Sharpton.
She'll run the Gulag re-education guards.
Yeah,
and that's going to be your that's going to be meat. That's going to be for Whitey to meet. And there's an awful lot of hate on Twitter. I kind of spotted some. Here's Carmen Beauty X, and she writes, "I say we shove big black." I'll just let you fill in the blank on that. "Into the throats of white women across the nation. Make their women record it. Make the kids watch. We had to be traumatized. Now it's y'all's turn." And then 50 Cent, which is actually another woman, or kind of a tranny looking woman, says, "I volunteer."
Oh, great.
So they got lots of very hate-filled people that bring in to run the camps, run the re-education centers, the gulags, the police of this new concept they have in mind. So the local, like I say, the local police are portrayed as bumpkins and morons, and that portrayal is false and exaggerated. And the thing is that local police have community ties, and a lot more likely to be sympathetic and accountable to their localities. It's a really good concept, community policing and local police. And the crime syndicate wants to break this traditional relationship down, replacing it by using this Israeli police model, and worse, kind of a freak police model.
Yes,
probably going way beyond what the Israelis would do.
Yeah, because there's a bit of a sadomasochistic strain that runs through that community. I'm sorry, but it's there, right? There's a sadomasochistic piece to it all. And and when you get into sadomasochism, right, what you're really talking about, you're talking about things like BDSM, and BDSM is just a power game. And that's exactly, what the person you were quoting on Twitter was talking about. Like, that's a power game. We're going to be the top, and we're going to make all these quote unquote white women be the bottoms. And it's right out of the Marquis de Sade. This is just an absolutely sick and twisted and perverted way of dealing with one's own sense of powerlessness. That's the other part of this, Russ, is that a lot of people feel incredibly powerless in the world because they don't have a spiritual foundation. They have no spiritual foundation. They're rudderless. They're like orphans being picked up by the Artful Dodger and being brought into the pickpocket gang. They're rudderless. They have no spiritual foundation. Fagin is waiting for them, and we're seeing the results of the powerless getting just a few little bits of power, and they're so starved and they're so hungry and so disempowered that when they get it, they foam at the mouth. They're almost
they all kind of reinforce each other with this kind of stuff I just read.
That's the other part of it.
And normalize it.
It's a group think, and normalization comes in. This is setting very dangerous precedents. And all this started with Obama. It all started with Obama when Obama failed to renounce a lot of these things. Like that thing that you just pointed to was, if I'm not mistaken, the Dallas thing. Wasn't Obama president then? If I'm not mistaken, I think he was president.
Yeah. Yes.
That's right. There were a lot of these things that were happening. By the way, prior to that shooting in Dallas, that's starting to kick into my head a little bit. There was a small art show that had taken place in Dallas where the artist had anti-Muslim art. So, and that was staged. Like they wanted to stage that. And right on the heels of that, you have this thing happen. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And Obama never renounced any of it. He never said, look, this has to stop. We're Americans, right? You may have your differences, but we're not going to tolerate this. We're Americans, and we're going to defend our constitutional rights to the fullest. And we are not going to tolerate the tearing away the fabric of our society, our culture, and our nation. He never did that. And what he did is he enabled more and more and more of it. And we're still in the enabling phase now.
Well, the Buffalo operation is all about demonization of what they call white extremists. And the ADL was up there within hours with all the talking points. And it's very much talking about how nasty, evil white people are.
Yeah. So the whole Buffalo thing, which we've got into.
The way they worded it, it says white people believe in this anti-Semitic theory called the Great Replacement. The polls show that. And therefore, all these people are dangerous extremists based upon one fake incident in Buffalo.
Right. So one of the things we talked about is the whole Buffalo symbolism, which is rife, right? I mean, it is fertile like a field of buffalo patties. I mean, that's how rife it is. And when you go back and you look at January 6th, who stands out in January 6th? It's the Buffalo shaman, the guy who has the flag painted on his face. He's got the buffalo hat on. He's got the buffalo horns. He's associated with January 6th. So where are they going to have the January 6th event or the Redux? Well, why not Buffalo? Because on a subconscious level, that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember this guy with his buffalo hat.
Extremist, like another extremist. Yeah,
exactly.
A cartoon world extremist.
Exactly, fake. A cartoon world extremist. And fake. He's fake. We have no idea if he's really in jail or not. We don't know.
But, the thing about this Buffalo thing in particular, I would highly recommend people get a hold of the Fetster evaluation and Brian Davidson that they did, because you will really see through this one. This was a really shoddy operation, and you got to get your heads out of your ass, folks, because you can't just keep giving these people passes. And I know everybody's just refuses to. Nobody wants to be accused of being Alex Jones or a conspiracy theorist. That's what it is. You got to get over that, because this is very serious stuff. And I predicted it after the Waukesha Christmas parade event and the Brooklyn event. We talked about that, right? We talked about Brooklyn, right? Did we do a show on that?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay, well, after those events, I came right out and I said, don't gloat over this being a person of color being the perp, because the next one's going to be a white supremacist. It's
Right.
coming. And
Right.
I was right. And I would go over to places like Hunt's Review and engage these guys over there. And there's a bunch of know-it-alls that have never looked into these events, don't know what the heck they're talking about. They just ran me out of town. I really got a poor reception over there trying to wake people up. And I said, well, they're coming for you because the white supremacist is next. And I don't even want to go over there and see what these people are thinking, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose if you don't start waking up to these events. So I consider these staged deceptions. I know they get kind of tiresome, particularly for people that know about it already and kind of understand it. But it's really important to evaluate these things. I think that showing this particular video will have a high level of success and conversion and waking people up. A lot of people will see it for what it is. I've shown it to some of my friends here in my country, Europeans, including some people that kind of laughed at me a little bit for my always calling it a fake. And they looked at it and said, this is a CG, this is computer graphics. They saw it. I said, well, you're not laughing at me quite as much now, are you? No. So this one's got a high conversion rate.
So I wanted to show you something here. I saved this on Twitter, and the narrative is that Ramos went in through the back door.
Right.
Here's the back door of the school, right here. And over here is the front door of the school, where theoretically everybody is staged. And if you go back and you look at, here, let me see if I get the verbiage on this.
Well, you can't just walk in the back door of
you
school
can't.
in the United States. They're locked up.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? That had to be a total fluke for him to have gotten through there.
Well, so in Texas, because I have a teenager who's graduating from high school here in Texas next weekend, and we moved here when he was in the third grade. So I'm pretty familiar with how kids check in and check out of the school system, from the elementary level through the middle school level through the high school level. And I got to tell you, it is a couple of yards short of being almost like a penitentiary. There's that much security involved. And in fact, after 9/11, it's after Sandy Hook. It was after Sandy Hook, Texas passed these really intense security laws for classrooms, and being able to get in to these areas is very difficult. So here's what this tweet says. The police stated today that the perp entered an unblocked back door. These images prove the green arrow is of a person that took the video of the perp entering the school. So the green arrow is here, right? That's the green arrow. And they are entering the school from this position. This is the back door. And by the way, most schools in Texas, if not all of them, they have cameras. They have cameras. They have cameras in the hallways. They have cameras everywhere.
Yeah, this school security thing is not a new topic, for heaven's sakes.
No. And so what we're looking at here is a complete fabrication. Here, I even pulled this in anticipation of talking about this. How Texas school security has changed since Sandy Hook. I mean, this is from 2013, 12/13/13. Saturday marks the 1-year anniversary of the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary.
So the guy crashes the car, runs around, I heard 12 minutes outside, engaging different, firing into a cemetery. The story just keeps changing.
Right.
Yeah, the story just keeps changing. Well, because it just makes it sound emotional. Here's a guy running amok. Nobody's really doing anything about it. Nobody's taking him out. Nobody's closing in on him and shooting him with a taser. The different devices that police have. And he's walking around doing this for 12 minutes and then just happens to walk into a secured school. That's cartoon world. I'm sorry. That's really all you need to know. And then engages the 3 police officers, which we've already discussed, wins the battle, and then gets into a schoolroom that's also secured and closed, locked. You can't just walk into a school classroom in the middle of session and show up and shoot people.
The doors are locked.
Right. So he's gone over multiple security barriers to get to his final objective of shooting 19 people or 21 people or whatever the latest story is. Impossible.
So I wanted to bring this up. This is just from a couple days ago. In fact, it was yesterday. And this absolutely illustrates what I'm talking about in terms of using an AR and being able to wound not 1, not 2, but 3 police officers who are likely in a spread formation. So check this story out, Russ. This is a really great compare and contrast story. This is from West Virginia. Woman legally carrying gun kills man who shot into crowd, police say. A woman in West Virginia fatally shot a man who began firing an AR-15 style rifle into a crowd of people that had gathered for a party, authorities said. Dennis Butler was killed Wednesday night after he pulled out the rifle and began shooting at dozens of people attending the birthday graduation party outside of an apartment complex in the city of Charleston, police said in the statement. The woman who was attending the party drew a pistol and fired, killing Butler. The statement said no one at the party was injured. Okay, let's just look at that. You got a guy who's got an AR-15, party's close quarters. It's not like you're spread out. This guy supposedly is firing the AR-15. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt.
He should dropped a whole bunch of people.
Exactly. So there's either 2 things here that are possible. One is that it didn't happen, but for the sake of the argument, we'll say it did happen. The other thing that's possible is that he's not a very good shot.
Yeah, or he didn't really get into range. That's a possibility. I mean, it's possible. There's enough hate out there. Even the guy in Buffalo, I'm willing to acknowledge that there are people that hate blacks. I will acknowledge that, but they're not going to carry it out by going after grandmothers or like Dylan Roof going into a church study in a church and killing grandmothers up there. Really?
Right.
I could see them maybe shooting some gangbangers on the corner or picking out some high value targets. He said in his manifesto, kill high profile enemies. That's what he ranted in his manifesto. And then they never kill high value targets.
Right.
I can't think of it. I can't think of any real, it kind of surprises me in a way. I would think there'd be some high level assassinations going on.
The only guy who fits the profile, but he fits it from the other side, is Steve Scalise, who was shot at the softball game in Washington, like the senator from Louisiana. And if we're to believe that, Rand Paul, kind of a high profile target, got beaten up by his neighbor. And then when there was a video clip of Rand Paul, I think from 2020, he was in Washington with his wife and I think maybe one of his aides and one of his security guys. And he was walking from some kind of a public event. He got seriously harassed.
Yeah, sure.
Seriously harassed.
That's real. Yeah, and you could kill him. Somebody could kill him.
Yep.
When I was in Washington, D.C. once, visiting my son, we were going out and we went by a restaurant and it had kind of an open window in there. And we looked in there and there's a group of people sitting, dining. And one of them was friggin' Ben Bernanke.
Oh, God.
He didn't have any security. I walked by, 20 years ago, there's a bookstore in Seattle in Laurelhurst, not too far from where Bill Gates's family lived. And I walked right by him in a Barnes and Noble, right by me. No security, none that I could see. Now maybe that's changed, but
I have to
we're all
say,
these high value. I mean, I'm not giving anybody any ideas. I'm not promoting this. I'm just saying
right,
this is the reality. This is the
right,
reality of the
right,
situation.
right. They're always going after low hanging fruit, whatever. And even if they are supposedly injured or dead or whatever their case is, um, whether these things are actually real, not a hybrid event, right? But that, to your point, nobody of any import ever,
I mean,
ever.
Gindren writes in his so-called manifesto. He says rich people need to pay their fair share. Well, that's not such a crazy idea. That's not such a crazy idea. But
It's
curiously,
that's a Bernie idea.
yeah, it's a Bernie idea, right? But curiously, the targets of his rampage were these old poor black people, and he was begging. How about the story where he's there the day before doing recon, and they had to ask him to leave the store because he was begging, panhandling from the poor black customers in there. Come on.
Interesting. So
Come on.
I've heard, I can't validate this as being completely true, but I've heard he was charged with only one homicide in that event. Only one. So whatever those other 9 people were, he's not being charged for the death of those 9 people. And the homicide he's being charged for, I think, is the security guard. The weird part about the security guard, and I've seen the link to this, apparently the security guard had a YouTube channel where he was working on water enhanced or water powered engines, which is really weird. Now, let's say he is dead, right? Let's say he is dead. He's not a CGI pop-up or whatever. If they wanted to kill somebody who was working on something like this, would they have to go through this elaborate staged event in order to take him out? No, they could do it any number of ways if they wanted to. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's a strange coincidence that he's working on some kind of advanced alternative fuel delivery system using water, and he's one of the victims. High strange.
Well, the other thing that you hear from what I call pajama people is they can't accept the idea. Well, what about these victims? Their pictures are right there in the newspaper. Who are these people? You can't hide that. Bullshit. That's what these guys do. That's what stagecraft and spycraft is. I mean, go watch the movie Little Drummer Girl. The stagecraft, the cutouts, the fake personas that they use. This is what they do. They've done it for centuries. They're expert at it. So it's just nonsense to think that they couldn't use cutouts and fake personas. It's easy.
His name is even changed. It used
to. According to the show I did with Fetzer and what's his name? I gotta get his
Brian.
name.
Is it Brian something?
Well, no, the other guy. Damn, I gotta mention his name because he's really good.
Danny Cirrus.
Danny Cirrus. Yeah, according to Danny Cirrus. Now, Danny Cirrus has checked the public records for this guy. Can't find him anywhere. And I mentioned that I know that he was born in North Dakota. He says, no, he's not up there. So he hasn't even been able to identify this guy in public records.
Well, so here's the weird thing is that when the whole Buffalo thing started, they actually reported the shooter under a different name. And I believe the guy's name was Fred Mortensen.
Yeah, that's to throw people off.
But then it becomes Peyton Gedron, and then his name changes to Peyton Gendron.
Yep.
Right. It was Gedron when this whole thing started. Now they drop an N in Gendron, like gender. It's bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre. And by finding,
I think that's part of stagecraft because it just kind of sends people going down blind alleys.
I think it is too. When I first encountered this was the Aurora, Colorado shootings with James Lee Holmes. And I started to look at those victims. They were either still alive or they didn't exist. Like a whole slate of victims, not alive, didn't exist. And it's like, how come nobody's talking about this? It's like they're just going to gloss right over it, and they're going to run out. Honestly, I'm not even convinced that was James Holmes who they were running out into the trial. If it was James Holmes, he had been completely MK'd ultra.
Well, James Holmes is, they did have a trial, and he's sitting there in the trial. So that was filmed,
right?
Kind of a funny way.
Yep.
But that's been about it for him.
He looks like a total basket case.
Drugged, right? In fact, he said he was drugged. He admitted it. He blurted it out. He said it. I've been drugged.
Yeah.
Mind controlled.
Yeah, that gets into. We talked about this last time that you and I got on and started to break this stuff down. He actually comes from the same part of the world as what's his name, John Earnest, who was the shooter at the temple, the Chabad temple in Poway, California. They literally come from the same, like within the same zip code. That's the same zip code. It's weird. It's very weird. You start to go down that rabbit hole. Then you get into Emma Gonzalez. Oh, there's that name again. Got Gonzalez, Emma Gonzalez. And she actually lived, her mother lived in, what is it? Rancho Santa Fe? It's right in that area. And so you also have the David Hogg connections with that area of San Diego, and then sort of South Orange County. Like it just gets all kind of twisted and entangled when you start to, uncover this stuff. And the other thing, Russ, I don't know if you follow my Twitter feed much, and I know that I do follow you and you do follow me, but if you go back and you look at the date of the Isla Vista shooting, which was with Elliot Rodger, that was 5/23. The date of the shooting in Uvalde was 5/24. And then the George Floyd event was 5/25. So you have these three events.
Busy time of year, huh?
all clustered, right, in that 3-day period. So what do you think is going to happen next? What's your sense?
I would start looking for these sort of sideline issues, maybe a little away from the gun control, because they can actually use the gun control kind of as a diversion. And then there are reasonable people out there that want gun control. To me, it's not a totally cut and dry issue. I favor gun ownership because it's kind of a safety valve for people to resist the crime syndicate. But here in Europe, there aren't any guns. It's pretty nice. So I get that part of it, but look out for these sidebar issues, this pre-crime stuff, the mental health stuff, snatch ups. Look out for the national takeover of the police, because people aren't really looking there.
Yeah,
I think there's too much focus on the gun control that's their only motive. I think it's much more than that.
Well, they seem to be interlinked. That in order to deny people access to a firearm, you have to deem that they're mentally and emotionally incompetent. So therefore, you're not going to get that, right? And where does that slippery slope stop? You're mentally and emotionally incompetent to work, or you're too mentally emotionally incompetent to see your child. Meanwhile, you've got Colonel Purple Hair running the National Transgender People Army, right? So this is what's going on. It's a strange, bizarre, inverted world where normally sane people who have ideas and thoughts and opinions that are unpopular are deemed mentally ill.
Yeah, and they use that as the facade to go after those people. People like you and me, for example, we fit into that.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
I mean, it's not too big of a stretch to say somebody's a paranoid or dangerous, mentally ill. Most mentally ill people aren't dangerous. They're not. Even schizophrenics. So
I would agree with you. The people who are the most dangerous are the ones who appear totally sane, right? The ones who are really
Yeah,
sane.
the Ted Bundys. I mean, he was.
Those are the scary ones, right?
Those are the scary ones, right?
Like
Because
Mike Pence looked totally sane, didn't he? What do you think's going on between those ears? Scary.
So that's you get the purple hair lady running this kind of stuff, and they can snatch you up, and that's what they did in Hungary and the Soviet Union. They love to put people in mental institutions.
Absolutely. And this is a little far afield, but some of the work that I've done and I've had other people come on the show and talk about are the appearance of sanitariums really early on in the history of this country. And not just any kind of these are massive buildings that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, and buildings, by the way, that people can't really explain how they were built during a time where there was very little population and the ability to move around these resources, mainly large blocks of granite and all the other things that that are involved in the creation of these buildings. They're just not there. You're pulling stuff around with a horse and a buggy. Let's just be honest here. And yet we have these major buildings that now become sanitariums. Well, why? Why did they deem them to be sanitariums? I think the consensus here is that there were people that were floating around during this time who might have been hip to another version of society or another version of reality that might have existed in a way that we're not aware of. And they're around to tell the tale. They're saying, look, this is different. You guys are hatching a completely different version of what the world is. So what do? They run them off into these sanitariums. And I got to tell you, Russ, the amount of sanitariums that pop up during this time, the time I'm talking about is just pre like 1900s. So like the late 1800s. It's phenomenal, these sanitariums.
Oh yeah, like that big sanitarium there at Newport, Connecticut, down the road from Sandy Hook.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
People should go take it. You can go inside there. People have done tours in there. Massive facilities.
So I think here's what happens. I think when a society is about to go through a sea change, when we are being told that there's a reset that's imminent, there are people who are resistant because they know and understand that what's coming is not in their best interest. And then what they do is they dig their heels in and they're saying, I'm going to die on this hill and not on my watch. So they'll do everything in their power to deem these people mentally unfit. And that's because we're in a sea change now and we're moving into this idea of the reset, which, by the way, Davos was happening at the same time this event was happening. They're laying out their plans in Davos. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a crazy, possibly transgendered kid who can't somehow afford the weapons, nor, to your point, which you brought up, even physically bring them in because of the amount of ammo and the amount of guns. It's like, are you kidding me? No, it's not possible. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about how they're running out personal carbon credit apps, which they will have, and moving us into the carbon credit economy. So this is a big deal. This is
the other thing of note is also here's a little tweet that went out from something called Independent Voices, which is a shitlib outfit, and it says far right attacks like the Buffalo shooting are the product of free speech absolutism. I mean, the first question I'd kind of ask is attacks in the plural. So even if you believe this Gendron went after black grannies for real, that's one attack. So I'm not quite sure why they use the plural on that.
Right. Well, they use the plural because they want to, pardon the pun, whitewash everything and make everything about this now.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say, opinion, one unfettered free speech, get far right attacks like Buffalo. The fact that 4chan, 4chan may radicalize people a little bit, but they're not going to go out and do this. Come on. 4chan and websites like that are able to continue with impunity after multiple terrorist attacks. So see all the shadow language they use?
Yep.
It's just like weird language, just invented languages to describe this. It's so mind-boggling to me that I'm not. So in other words, the use of shadow language, the use of these incorrect use of the language, the incorrect use of what has actually transpired, no consideration of the reality of what's transpired. Now, there's a lot to pick apart there.
So I've been thinking about people in general, their lives in general. And just a few days ago, there's a kind of a sports writer gadfly that lives in California named Grant Cohn. And I've been following Grant for a while. He started off as a writer for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. His father, Lowell Cohn, was a sports writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. And Lowell Cohn was not really well liked in terms of the athletes and even some of the people who wrote his columns. But, you know, he was interesting. And sometimes Lowell would say things to disturb shit. And other times Lowell would say things that were accurate and on the money. And he would say them probably in ways that other people would take offense to, right? Now we're in this society where people are so easily fucking offended that it boggles my mind. So Grant Cohn, Lowell's son, got a boost up and started to do stuff on SB Nation, I think. And he has a YouTube stream. He's got a Twitter account. He goes to the 49ers. He covers them. And he's like a mosquito. And he'll poke and he'll poke and he'll poke. But I've never heard Grant get personal. Like, he's never talked about any of these athletes in a personal way. He's never questioned their intelligence. He's never questioned anything about how they run their personal lives. So he's kept it pretty much at a high level, football level, but he's annoying. He can be really, really annoying. So last week at practice, there's this guy named Javon Kinlaw who plays for the 49ers. He's a first round pick, top 10 pick. So you expect your top 10 pick to be able to play well. 3 years into his career, Javon Kinlaw's not doing really well. And Grant Cohn has noted that. Like, does he have, are his knees unable to play in the NFL? I mean, these are, look, people may think sports is garbage and who or whatever. It's fine. But we can take the temperature where things are with sports. They are kind of a weather vane with our culture now. So Javon Kinlaw walks up to him at practice and gets behind him. He walks all the way across the field. He's not suited up, by the way. And then he starts to verbally attack him from behind. Right? I've never heard of this, by the way, from an athlete and a sports writer. And you've been kind of around that world, and you kind of know how it works. There's
a lot of trash talking. There's a lot.
Right. I mean
among teammates, among management, even among coaches. I mean, you have to have a kind of a thick skin to be.
You got to have a thick skin. I mean, there's a whole Jordan rules book, right? So you know all about this stuff. Anyway, Javon Kinlaw, Grant Cohn's wearing a cap. Javon Kinlaw flips his cap off of him on the sideline of practice. I've never heard about anything like that before. And I've been following sports for a long time. Athletes generally don't cross that line. He did at that practice. So Grant, of course, he's gonna talk about it. So he has a show where he starts to talk about what happened. By the end of the show, Javon Kinlaw, the player from the 49ers, shows up on his show. I've never seen anything.
You got my interest on this one. Go ahead.
Russ, I've never seen this before. Okay. Kinlaw goes on there. He's got a mouthful of food while he's trying to call him out. And so eventually Javon Kinlaw starts comparing nut size, that Grant's little white nuts shriveled up. Right. So he goes into some very dark territory, you know, like he's He's not comporting himself the way the 49ers would like to have one of their athletes. I can tell you that right now. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but he's
especially in public. You can do kind of it in private.
In private, you can talk shit all you want.
Yeah.
Now he's doing this in public. And again, I hate to say this, it's stereotypical, right? Like if you're sitting back and you were looking at that thing, you go, oh, that dumb fucking so-and-so, right? I mean, that's exactly how he's showing up. You know, instead of coming up to Grant at practice, say, hey, look, man, I think your comments are getting a little too close to the bone with some of the players. I'd like to talk to you about them after practice. Well, he doesn't do that. Instead, what does he do? He knocks his hat off like a schoolyard bully, right? This is what it's about. So this thing got national. Jason Whitlock talked about it. And Jason's, of course, on the press side of things because he's a journalist. I think Lawrence Taylor threatened to kill him one time or something like that. I mean, Jason didn't make a lot of friends. He had one friend, and that was what's his name? Derek Thomas. He and Derek Thomas were buddies. So Jason, of course, is going to be more supportive of Grant because all it is just journalism. Like, if you don't like it, fucking play better. Play better. You know, don't take it out on the guy who's calling you out on your arthritic knees. You know, play better. But so this Will Smith thing changed how we interact with public figures now. Because he crossed that line. Whatever you think of that event, stage, not stage, quasi-stage, he crossed the line. Now, the blowback that I've seen with this whole thing with Grant Cohn, this is the part I wanted to bring up because I had to set the stage for it a little bit. The people who are going after Grant Cohn now are saying that, well, he's got to be more even. He's got to be more objective. He's got to do this. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to do anything. If there's anything you need to do is not watch his channel.
Right.
Or unsubscribe from his Twitter feed.
Right.
He doesn't have to change any, but this is the problem.
You know, the other thing is that if the athletes don't like this guy, they don't have to give him access.
Well, he doesn't get access. So he's doing reporting. He's doing quasi.
You got to treat these athletes fairly well to get access to them. That's just the way it is.
You got to kiss their ass.
Right.
Bottom line. And I'm pretty convinced that as far as fans go, athletes at best tolerate them at best. And at the worst, they probably despise them. So it's already kind of a weird. So the fans come out and now they're all after Grant Cohn. You know, they're all after him because, you know, he's not treating the 49ers fairly enough. He's toxic. He's poisoning the 49ers. Don't let him in the building. Pat McAfee, former player who's turned into a real slob douchebag, says that the 49ers should revoke his press pass. So what's interesting here, Russ.
Well, see, these teams are tribes. They're gonna rally around
the players are tribes for sure.
Yeah, they're gonna rally around their teammates and support him. And if there's any kind of leadership anymore that's still left, somebody will do an intervention with this player, this Grant guy, or
what are the fans doing though? The fans are siding with the player, and they're siding with the organization.
Right, of course.
And so what I've derived from this, and I'm not going to put everybody into this bucket, but I've come to the conclusion that the majority of the people on this planet hate themselves and they despise their lives. And that's a byproduct of the culture that we're in now. It may not have been the case 40 years ago or 50 years ago. There may have been more self-care. Like your father was a stand-up guy, took his craft seriously, right? Just a different generation. My father, you know, he never made more than $45,000 a year, but he could plumb a fence. He could change a dishwasher. Like, these were capable men, and they lived their lives without a lot of fanfare. And I think everything's got flipped. And what we have is we have a bunch of incapable men.
A bunch of prima donnas.
Yeah, incapable and thirsting for fanfare. And it's just an absolute distended balance. And so that's why, just to bring this around to our discussion, that's why I think that these situations that are popping up with the false flags, with the psychological operations, and you've got the Purple Hair Army, the pre-crime, all that stuff. That's why ultimately people will be supportive of it, because they hate themselves and they hate their lives. And so they will have, there's a term for it, it's called Schadenfreude. And so it's the Schadenfreude for the system, for the things that they don't have. And this is where we get into almost like third world kinds of consciousness, right? In the third world, it's a big world of haves and have-nots. And you go into third world countries and it can get pretty scary, pretty dangerous. And that third world consciousness has infiltrated the first world here. And now this idea that they want to burn it down, whatever that thing is, they're fine with it because they hate their lives and they despise society that they're living in. And yet they have no positive contribution or no answer to the very same thing that they despise.
Yeah, they're going to pick out their imaginary enemies and scapegoats and all this kind of stuff, right?
Right. And they hate Grant. Look, Grant could be an asshole. I've seen him be an asshole. I've seen Grant like sort of dip into the race card every now and then, and I've called him on it, right? But you're supposed to be able to call people on shit. I still follow him because I think he has some interesting things to say every now and then. Now I'll follow him just because the mob's after him now. Now I'll follow him, even though I don't really like maybe 10 or 15% of his content. Who cares? Right? Who cares?
So Grant Cole sounds like he's a white guy, right?
Grant Cohn. He's
Cohn.
White. His father is Jewish and his mother's Italian. What's interesting about his father is his father loves Thomas Sowell, right? So his father is pretty conservative in terms of his social values. So I think his father got his PhD from Stanford. And
so he's like a mixed race guy.
Grant's mixed. He's
mixed. Okay, so he's mixed race, and then the other guy that he had was a so-called brother of the black player.
Javon Kinlaw is black and from South Carolina, and from everything that I've kind of inferred about his background, tough background, typical tough sports background, hard life, bad family, kind of lucky to be alive and out of jail.
So Jamal probably looks at this Cohn guy as some kind of privileged black. Maybe that's part of what's going on in his head.
Maybe Javon. So I think here's what I think has happened to Javon. He's listened to Kwame Brown videos, and Kwame Brown, you know who Kwame Brown is, right? He was drafted by Michael Jordan, first round pick. And Michael was pretty hard on Kwame, and I think he lasted 2 seasons with the Wizards.
Right.
And Kwame wound up having, I think, about a 13-year career in the NBA. And if you're a bust, you don't stick around in the NBA for 13 years. And Kwame, once he left the game, went about his business. But people kept bringing up all the bust stuff. Stephen A. Smith brought it up. Matt Barnes brought it up. Gilbert Arenas brought it up. And eventually Kwame snapped. It's like, I've been out of the game for 7 years. And it's like, I'll quote him, y'all bringing this up again. And he just said, fuck it. I'm going to let you have it. And there was about a month there where Kwame Brown was a flamethrower. And he was going after Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, Gilbert Arenas. Man, he was torching him. And then Kwame got into some interesting things. He said, look, I'm a man and I got kids. And you're spreading all these rumors. My kids are on the internet. They read this stuff. They hear. Don't you understand that? Don't you? And to his point, I think he has a point. Like what he did in the NBA shouldn't necessarily be like mocked, especially since he hasn't been in the game for about 6 or 7 years. Now, Javon Kinlaw is playing, and that's different, right? That's different. And the reason why I think he's heard Kwame Brown, he's used some of the same language. He's like almost like channeling Kwame Brown in certain parts of his little diatribe there. But I think they're different. They're very, very different. Kwame Brown left the game. He's not relevant. And yet they continue to make him relevant by calling him the biggest bust of all time. If they're doing it to cash in,
13-year
Yeah.
career.
and Russ, you've been around this stuff. You know how hard it is to even be the 12th guy on the team.
To have a 13-year career is pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah. I mean, if you're the 12th guy on a team, you're still better than 99.9% of everybody else. Not
everybody gets the opportunity to play for the championship team. Sometimes they have to play for second tier teams. That's just the way it goes.
Right. Exactly.
Shouldn't be held against anybody.
I agree. And the guys
look at George Brett. He probably could even a bigger star than he was, but he's in Kansas City his whole career. Guys like that.
Could you imagine if Brett had played in Atlanta?
Right. Or New York.
Well, Atlanta had the home run park. Like Atlanta's over 1,000 feet in the air. And so the balls travel much easier when they're in an elevated park. They had relatively short fences. There's no coincidence that Hank Aaron sets the home run mark by playing the bulk of his career in Atlanta. George Brett in Atlanta, my God, he probably finishes with about 400 home runs, 450 home runs. So you're right. Set and setting mean a lot in these things. But Javon Kinlaw he's still cutting his teeth. His performance can be judged. That's the bottom line. It can be judged. Judging Kwame Brown's performance after he's been out of the game for 7 years, come on. There's not a lot of meat on that bone.
Sounds like these guys have a shortage of interesting topics.
Well, I think
it sounds like the guys covering the game are a bunch of ne'er-do-well bozos.
Well, I think, you look at your general, for instance, again, you may be boring the shit out of my audience, but if Javon Kinlaw played in a place like New York or Philadelphia, it wouldn't just be some internet guy. It'd be the entire town. These people don't understand. San Francisco's soft, right? It's like everybody wants to get along with each other and chill and be buddy-buddy. You have one fly in the ointment, and then everybody gets up in arms. The reason I'm bringing this up because it gets into this whole idea of not offending people. You can't offend people. This is what Jordan Peterson talks about. And you can't have freedom of speech unless you're offensive. I'm sorry. That's the bottom line. Bottom line. And now we're in a society where everything's watered down, dumbed down, mediocre, middle of the road, and even being slightly offensive makes you stick out from the crowd. You're no longer doing kumbaya with the NPCs.
Yeah, here's kind of what I have on this topic. Let me just read this because I think it ties into a little bit what's going on. I say plastic words and phrases are language which is used so commonly but loosely as to lose its meaning. It is used for stagecraft, theatrical performance rather than to convey clear meaning. With minimal substantive meaning and clear definition, they are useful as tools of Orwellian misdirection and lies. They are widely used as tools of propaganda and are particularly insidious when passed into law. Well, that's what that guy is doing with that comment about right-wing extremism.
Yep.
He's very, very loose with events, the interpretation of what these events actually were, and the use of his language and just stretching it as far as he can. And I'm amazed that people could get away with that.
Yeah. Well, if you could,
it's the hate thing you're talking about.
It is the hate thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most people are living their 2 minutes of hate on a daily basis. And they hate their lives. They despise society, and anything that allows them a moment of Schadenfreude, it's like being born again. And this is a very, very, it's a very dangerous place for our society to be.
Well, the larger message I'll leave with everybody is you can't let these guys get away with these events and then interpret it the way they want. And, you've got to educate your friends. There's too many people that believe these are real events. Huge problem.
Yep. Well, yeah. And then we could probably do a whole other show about how to soften up their craniums so that you may be able to get inside there. But most people are just terrified now, and they're forcing people into the safe and secure camp, which is a whole other discussion and part of the psychological operation. Russ, it's been great. I know it's getting late over there, and you probably need your beauty sleep so you can get up and train.
Enjoyed it as always, Robert. Thanks a lot.
So we'll see you again on the last Friday of next month of June, because you're going to be here as a regular fixture now on the last Friday, so we can recap some of these things. And if you are not familiar with Russ's site, it's winterwatch.net. You go on over there and check into all of Russ's great research into a lot of these things that we're talking about today. So in the meantime, Russ, you take good care of yourself.
Okay. See you, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. So that was Russ Winter. We'll be back on Sunday night. I'm going to get out of here now. I'm going to go do something. I'll see you guys on Sunday night here on this channel, 8 p.m. I'm going to start changing the time. Not this week, but next week, we're going to start to run Sunday Night Astro Live at 6 p.m. Central, because it's a more reasonable time for everybody. Okay. Much love to you all. Stay strong, stay loose, stay limber, stay human, and use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to sip on what's possible. And a big shout out to my girl, Lynette, in Southern Oregon, who's saying goodbye to her dear friend, Philbert, tonight, who is not going to be able to make it in his little physical body. We're losing another one of our really important, animal guardians. So Lynette, we're all with you, and enjoy your last day with Phil, and we'll see you soon. Okay, bye for now.